You know what? This sort of looks like...
Now you cannot just think that Modlin is the only great military construction around Warsaw. For centuries the town have been of great importance and fought for countless times. But along with the great forts around Modlin, the Russians also constructed large forts and defenses for Warsaw itself. But let's start with the beginning of relevant events to this. In 1807, Napoleon had begun to construct key fortifications around Modlin and Warsaw, as he set out from Moscow, having a less of a stellar time there than he had expected. He would lose the war to the Sixth Coalition eventually, and with that his empire. That left the Poles in possession of Modlin and Warsaw, at least initially, until February 5th, 1813, when the Russian Tsarist army arrived and laid siege to Modlin, and eventually took possession of that and Warsaw. The Poles were defeated by some 32,000 Russian soldiers, and a large part of Poland and Warsaw was all incorporated into the Russian Empire. And a period of coexistence began, which would last until 1830. Where the Poles had had enough of trying to learn Russian grammatics and rose up against the Russians. For the first time, out of an ungodly amount of uprisings. You see, the Polish are a very proud people who really do not take crap from anybody for very long. Hardly a week goes by in Poland without the calendar celebrates one or another uprising. And don't you even think about raising the price of bread out there. Anyway, the Russians suppressed this uprising, and the Russians now apparently began to realize they were not particularly welcome. So they began to construct fortresses to defend themselves against the population. This included the great Warsaw Citadel in the center of Warsaw, full of artillery which could cover the entire city. They also began to construct a huge central artillery fort with some of the largest fortress buildings I have ever seen. This is what we'll look at today, although they didn't start construction of that until later. The massive Russian construction lasted until 1841. Then 8 more forts were constructed in 1888, the one we're seeing today among them. However, the great buildings that we are going to visit today were almost destroyed, and strangely enough, not due to an uprising, but, well, the Russians again. Surprise. Anyway, during the early 19th century, during the Russian-Japanese War, the Russians had their rear quarters soundly handed to them, and most of their navies sunk. So the new Minister of War, Vladimir Sukhomlinov, began to think manly thoughts about how war was now actually waged, and pointed out the obvious that the old citadel forts were completely obsolete, and actually had been since somewhere around 1884, with the invention of the new shells, white gunpowder, breech-loading cannons, and all that. Okay, he was 20 years late, but he was not wrong. So he suggested to level it all, and began to do so. He wanted to spend the money on upgrading field armies with shiny new guns and stuff. But of course, the Russian upper class, he was not part of that, the leadership, they liked the ideas of holding large buildings. Then, as much as they do now, so they threw 800 million rubles towards the old forts and began to build more of them. And as I have showed you over the past month, they did construct some of the most modern cement with steel fortresses of the time. And the added money was also spent on filling all of these with stocks of food, munition, and guns. So when Ludendorff showed up in 1915, he could greatly enjoy the vast stores he had now taken possession of. Anyway, some of the old forts were destroyed, and others were slated for destruction by Sukhomlinov before he was stopped, and Fort Berma was among them, and he managed to destroy a few smaller parts before the halt order to the madness came. However, the Tsar had spoken, So we get to visit Fort Berma today, built between 1886 and 1890, as part of the construction of the second inner ring of fortress forts. It was an artillery fort. Constructed in this way, despite the previous war experience, clearly showed the unsuitability for such types of construction. But they did build it bigger, so there. Fort Berma was a brickworks with huge earthworks. It was surrounded throughout by a perimeter of a wet fortress ditch, up to 20 meters wide. The upper parts were for artillery, the lower parts for infantry. No caponiers or escantment pens were created here because they feared it was too damp from the wet moss here. Under the artillery shaft were communication passages to the infantry shaft. Such passages combined with small smudges and an artillery shelter. Some of them we cannot visit anymore. The main part of the fort was 4 symmetrically spaced warehouses. All rooms had windows, which significantly made them further vulnerable to artillery, and this was not changed even during the modernization of the fortress later. The fort was to be destroyed as part of the Warsaw Fortress liquidation. In 1909, it was not, however, executed. In the summer of 1913, only a food store and 1 other building was apparently blown up, and I find it really strange that they were not planning on dismantling buildings using the materials elsewhere. They were actually blowing them up.
For the ventilation. And this is one of the smaller buildings. But clearly this is a munition storage. If you look at small windows in the back, this was always a munition store that then turned into production. But so the lights for the black powder magazine would have been housed. These have been sealed up. All of these were munition stores. So there's a little hallway back here. That I don't exactly see how to get to.
And here it is today, a somewhat lost fort in the center of Warsaw. One nobody seems to know what to do with. So it's been left on its own devices, and lots of bastards with spray cans. I would think it a perfect place for a cafe and a military museum, but that's just me.
Here in the rampart is part of an arch, and I don't know where it came from. It's part of an underground, one of the underground tunnels and masonry, and I know because there's actually a piece of a hinge here. I don't know if this was part of the destruction or there was a walk-through here, since there's also another piece on the other side. I think this was part of destruction. I think they landed here. But there's more of them, so now I'm actually kind of curious what it was that could have been here that was destroyed and cracked. One of the magazines or munition productions are in there. Then there's these pieces lying here. Don't know where they came from. I can't tell, honestly. Don't see any reason for them to be here. I think it was part of a powder magazine for the artillery that would have been placed here on the ramparts. There's another bridge over the moat. And remember, there was heavy fighting here in 39, so it's entirely possible that there were parts of the original fort that was destroyed in that fighting as well. Could have been part of this building too. There indeed was a full building here, not just an end with the massive dirt mounds surrounding the barracks and munition production inside. These really are very, very large.
All right, let's just get it out of our systems collectively. These forts are heavily overpainted with graffiti. So take a deep breath, have a cup of Earl Grey tea and a scone, and we'll all grind our teeth separately as we go in.
So that's the tunnel down to the other side, out. You said the Polish army was using this a little bit until some years after the war as well?
It was only what I read that during the war when they were disbanded. I think it was further.
Fireplaces are neat. I wonder if they were original or they were something that came later. They all must have to have been original, isn't it? The whole roof, they must have been original since you have to have made a ventilation hole and the thick roof and everything. Could have done without the graffiti, but since that's the thing here, and here's another fireplace. Well, I guess we can see how it was constructed. Metal and mesh. And feeding on shoes. Oh well. No. No. That was an interesting cutout. So there's a fireplace in almost every room. That must have been an original throwback to the time of the Czar. World War II, they would have had far smaller ovens if they needed to, plus this was for industry. And the Polish army must have afterwards, they wouldn't have needed that, they would have come up with something more modern, right?
From 1921 to 1939, there was an ammunition factory here operated by the Polish army, and the buildings were somewhat modified for this. In 1939, the fort was initially staffed by 202 men from the 4th Battalion of the 30th Kaniowski Rifle Regiment, led by Captain Bogodan Rosnokowski, and from 9 September he defended the fort well. And, despite numerous German attacks, it was defended and held until the capitulation of Warsaw. If the Polish do not know what to do with these buildings, I will be happy to take them off their hands and turn them into something interesting. Really, I promise.
Open, but it doesn't look like that's going to stop me from getting in. It seems more fun, doesn't it? Except there's probably a turnaround. There is. Ooh, this might be more fun. So maybe we have to crawl through the door, but I think, oops, unless this just ends here, this should go around the powder mag exchange. I just don't know why.
But there isn't any.
Huh. This isn't, fuck, we have to crawl through the small hole in the door. Yeah, we do. Unless you want to crawl through here. I think the small hole in the door might be more fun. Is this just a tunnel that runs down there? So there's tunnels that runs all around this building, on the inside. To a very large room. You know what? This sort of looks like, this looks like World War II cement, doesn't it? This looks like they built this inside. Doesn't this looks World War II? This looks like, yeah. I mean, that's hard. This is hard. I don't know. I don't know what this. So we have electrical on the walls. Huh. I mean, if you're gonna start making World War II munitions, I can see why you might want to rebuild the old barracks or the old building. The other building opposite this does not look like this. This is cement. This is not original construction. This was built in 1830 something. That's not, this is new. Certainly newer. And this is all the crap people have thrown in the towers from above over the years. And that's closed. So this has been sealed off since, but the electrical cables came through there. There's electrical ran through this little round box there. This room was not original construction. Electricity runs throughout, but I know you're on the outside of this hall. This is red brick. So I can't say the inside tunnel was specifically World War II construction, but I can absolutely say it was not part of the original plans. Because in the original plans, this building is not featured at all. So it could have been a 1915 pre-World War I construction. This is sealed up too. Okay, so there's one more tunnel left. And the door is not exactly new. That certainly could be an older door. Alright. Well, it is an older door. Stupid thing to say, but you know what I mean. Damn well better not be sealed up in the other end. There's another little room and another door that is closed. We can see from the outside. Don't know if we can get to it here. It looks like we can. And let's see where it's at. Here, the other door. The metal door and that whole thing is new. So you had two wooden doors that could easily be World War II. These doors are original. These are numbers. And when I say original, I mean original to whatever this was. With iron on the side. Wow, this is very interesting. On the map, the building is identical, except this side has been sealed up. And here's one more chimney up here. And then, of course, going to the tunnel here, the next door also sealed. That is sealed up for some reason. And there's another room in there. I can actually see through that hole there's another room in there. Well, that's interesting. But this, it could be 1915 construction. There's the hole there. Damn it to hell. I'm so glad I have a snake camera that I left, you know, outside. There's just probably another little walking tunnel out that way. So theoretically, we should be able to get to that through the second door here. Like here, actually, yes. Yeah. Well, that was not as exciting as I had hoped for. Alright, fine. That's the kind of detail that they certainly didn't do if they built this in World War II. So it's probably World War I reconstruction, given the finesse. I just don't know if the tunnel inside was then repurposed or refurbished. Specifically, well, the Polish military were using this for munition production from before the war. So they could have done it.
In the years of 1940 to 44, here was a German weapons warehouse with a number of brick guard shelters that was constructed around them. And again, some modifications were done as well. Of course, in 1944, this was the target, one of the targets, of the Polish resistance who attacked the warehouses to obtain weapons and munitions. There was heavy fighting in the area throughout the period of the Polish uprising. Remember what I said about that. After the end of the war, here was a camp of German prisoners for a while, and after that, in 1950 to 78, the fort belonged to the base of the military airport in Brno.
Stone and brick. So you're saying we're in one of the old forts in the center of Warsaw? This is an interesting building. That's not built like what we usually see. Could there have been a heater or something in here, and this being chimneys? Maybe? I don't know. Bathrooms? Bathrooms. It would be nice if any of them was not drowning in graffiti, but it's a little undignified for an old military installation. But still, you can see the components. This is not close defensive. I don't know what this is. There's no close defensive. This is peacetime barracks in some strange way. They really are very large buildings up here on the roof. I guarantee you here was a flagpole, because with these huge buildings and this staircase, guarantee you every morning some dude walked up here and planted a flag. Oh well, father raised it. So on either side, we have a barrack there, or whatever it is. And this is interesting.
This is interesting.
Isn't it?
Something different, I guess.
I mean, there's only like every weird, different type of fortress in the world in this long tunnel. Okay, let's do the simple thing. The close defensive or the gatehouse. I'm going to go with gatehouse because there's nothing defensive in any of this. This is where this ends, whatever this is. This is really interesting. Huh? Oh, wow. Middle of the town?
Yes. That's why I wanted to take it here, because it's...
Well, I mean...
Yeah, I think it's really well preserved.
Well, I mean, the graffiti paint is certainly holding it well together.
But this part is really popular among people.
I know. Okay, so there was a door that connected to the next one at one point. And I see nature through that little hole. Huh. Interesting. I have no idea what this is. Well, just, you know, ignoring the graffiti and just looking at these enormous buildings of actually very ornate. I would think middle of the 1800s, but you say late 1800s. There's a cloud of graffiti. There's a cloud of mist over here with a chemical feel to it. I've never seen mist that smells chemical. I'm just saying, maybe somebody's painting this as we speak. I guess there's actually a colored mist here. It's very interesting.
built in the 19th century.
Really?
1886, 1890.
1890.
During the Second World War, there were German military warehouses also.
Interesting. Military warehouses during the Second World War. That I can absolutely get on board with. I get that. That's probably why it's all bricked up for safety. A lot of entrances and doors were bricked up and steel doors were put in here. I mean, Warsaw was an important town. Here?
Because we're there in Żoliborz district, so it was the first district when Warsaw Uprising started.
Really? Well, that makes it interesting to ask, what did the Germans store here that the Warsaw uprisers could have used? If this was... Yeah, it's a bat. Get used to it. I don't think they're birds. I don't think there's bats. Well, maybe bats.
I would say
They're in there. They're right there. And these are not bats, these are birds. Look at that, that's a little beak. That's not a bat, that's a bird. That's a bird's nest. It has a beak. It has a yellow beak. Look, it's looking for mom. I'm gonna go away from it because mommy is just flying around. It's not a bat.
But which birds have nested in such places? Just bats.
No,
Yes.
this was a bird, not a bat.
Yes.
Anyway, back to the Warsaw Uprising. Keep focus. But trust me, that was a bird. It's a bird's nest. It's probably a sparrow or something.
Oh, before the First World War, there were munition factories, something like that.
Really? That's, again, very interesting. I don't know why I decided to call it a broken brick. I just do because I'm an idiot. So, and bathrooms. Very interesting. I was curious what they were storing here during the Second World War, because if there's anything that Warsaw uprisers could use, if this was munition, this would be a serious thing. Or it could be a serious problem. Over there. There's just so many of these. I keep wanting to see something for defense, but if this was, well, it might have been when it was built for defense and then blocked up for storage. But this is a very ornate building. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of history in this. And it really doesn't stop. This is such a strange layout. You have, it's like an end of a building of an end of a building. I would imagine these are defensive points, but that is some real serious ventilation. Intakes up there. I mean, these are ventilation intakes. You said there used to be bars over these?
Yes.
That makes sense. So something can't get in, but except air. tell from standing on the roof of one of these things, these buildings are huge.
And since there are vast amounts of amazing forts and bunkers surrounding these towns, there will be many more episodes from here in the future. And I will do a special of the Battle of Warsaw. All of them, actually. I think there was 4 or 5 of them. I lost count. And also the Warsaw Uprising. And in case you don't know, these are actually 2 separate events, although they did take place roughly at the same time. But a lot more on that later.
Behind me is Wernher von Braun's first test stand. Down the road is Diebner's nuclear reactor. Over there is the Maginot Line and all its amazing forts. I'm visiting them all and I'm bringing them to you. So I really appreciate you like, follow, and share what I'm doing, trying to document all these important historical locations. And if you feel like you want to watch more pictures or documents that I use for these, go to lostbattlefields.com. And if you feel like helping me out with my travels, because gasoline and travel and airfare is expensive, my PayPal is there, protectionserviceint.com. You are more than welcome, but you don't have to. I appreciate all your support and all your help, and I love seeing these locations, and I love bringing them to you.